Hello, hi everybody. This is Bella, the Secret Psychic, and if this is the first time you're at my page, welcome. What I do every week is I do live streaming about different subjects when it comes to all things spiritual, I guess. And in this case, actually, there's a bit of a crossover between spirituality, but also to do with the human aspects, let's say, when it comes to dealing with anxiety. So the topic for today that was voted on by people in my community on my Facebook page, and if you're watching the repeat of this, do join my community, do like my page. Again, this is not just me talking at you guys, so do interact, do like, please do share this post as well if you think it will be useful for anybody else as well. But the subject today is how not to absorb energy, grounding techniques. I've had to change the title because I don't want to be in trouble by Facebook. So for those of you who know what the title was before, the same still applies. Anyway, welcome everybody. As you know, I'm going to be trying to interact by sort of giving you some techniques over on this very subject, as well as try to pick up any comments as well, so do bear with me. And this is also being shown live on YouTube, so hello to my YouTube people who are also watching as well. So we're going to be covering how not to absorb energy. And what I mean by energy is kind of energy that can overwhelm us and that can lead us to cause anxiety, that can lead us to feel out of place, that can lead us to feel panicky, probably is the best word to say, but for some people it can disable us, let's say, for a short time, or for some people it can be quite chronic. And so this approach, I'm looking at this from the aspect of if you work spiritually, let's say, and how you sort of ground yourself and how you should be grounding yourself, but also looking at if you are already quite a light sensitive kind of being, but also maybe you're just generally somebody who suffers with quite a lot of anxiety, to kind of look at the holistic approach, but also the kind of cognitive approach to this. So when I mean sort of empathically, those are for people who have clairsentience or perhaps even work in a sort of healing field, and that doesn't necessarily mean holistic. But with those kind of energies, it's about how when you're in service to others, you are absorbing, let's say, the energy that is unhealthy for you to retain, and that you must find a way of grounding yourself and also being able to release that energy so that it doesn't have something that's called vicarious trauma on you, which is basically you kind of going through it, kind of mentally scarring you actually from actually psychological perspective. But also if you are somebody who suffers from anxiety, to kind of unpick where that comes, and usually it comes about because of some sort of experience, kind of trauma, whether that's big or small, and how that kind of impacts us. But what I've found over the years of doing this, whether you are empathic or whether you just suffer from anxiety, is that quite often a lot of anxiety is rooted to disconnection, feeling disconnected from something, someone. Once you can understand that, and why sometimes your energy will go sort of haywire, it's normally 9 times out of 10 because of a disconnection to something, and it's learning how to either reconnect to that something or find something else to either complete that let's say that experience or that energy in a way that you can kind of get rid of it, forgive it, or to move on from it and embrace or turn it actually to your advantage, so that you can actually therefore help other people. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of people who have worked empathically, or who have work as a psychic or work as a healer, quite often, let's say, sometimes have experienced their own sort of trauma. It's a way of learning and shaping people sometimes, in order for them to be able to identify a feeling, so that they can therefore help other people. Because sometimes if you haven't gone through that experience, let's say, or seen others go through that experience, being able to identify that feeling can be quite tricky. So just going to quickly look to see if anybody's on, because I can see some flashes from the side. So hi Jess, I'm sending you all my love today, Jess. I hope you're okay. And hi Amy. You said you couldn't get on, but I'm glad to see you here. Right, so what I'm going to do, as you know, I'm going to sort of push forward and go to my first slide. And my first slide is really what I call top 10 quite quick tips that are very much the holistic approach. So we're going to start with that stage, and then we'll sort of get a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. So I'm going to switch to another screen. So bear with me. So I talk about top 10 tips. Okay, so we are going to now look at very quickly top 10 quicks for grounding. Very quick ones. And then we'll get into a bit more sort of deeper level stuff and some meditation techniques that will also help. But the first thing, you know, sometimes is just to go out barefoot and put your feet on the earth. And I don't mean concrete, I mean dirt, beach, actual ground. And spend some time there until you feel better. It doesn't take very long, because, you know, if you want to look at the science behind it, or if you want to look at this in terms of energy, as you all know from previous videos I've done, in terms of we are all energy one way or another. The earth is also energy, but also it is our mother, for want of a better word. And so in terms of what happens at a magnetic and energetic kind of level, it kind of roots you. And that's why a lot of people, when they work with chakras, often will encourage a lot of walking barefoot or sitting with your feet on the ground, in order to help ground you and help you to stay focused and help to get rid of any negative energies that don't serve us. Number 2 is to bring your attention to the present moment. So this is where meditation helps, but also some techniques that I'm going to talk about later, which is to kind of take you out of what is triggering anxiety, or let's say what you may have absorbed in that day if you've been working as a in an empathic ability, whether that is spiritual, or whether that's actually because you're a nurse or you're a doctor, or you do something where you are constantly in your everyday life absorbing energies of others, and you're giving of yourself because you are in service to others. So you need to bring yourself into the present moment quite often to be able to kind of manage that. Eating root vegetables is number 3, and reducing your meat intake. Now, for some people, not eating meat at all is a life-changing thing, because for some people, and I tend to agree, as we absorb the flesh of another, and the flesh of another that has been traumatized, it can not help us greatly, because we are absorbing that kind of energy. So if you're a sensitive soul, you're an empath, or you suffer with high anxiety, then reducing your meat intake or taking it out completely will help ground you, but also eating plenty of root vegetables. So what I mean by that is vegetables that have grown in dirt, so potatoes, carrots, those kind of plants. To have much more of that in your diet will help reduce anxiety. Number 4 is crystals. I'm so in love with crystals. I'm a crystal maniac. If you saw my collection of stuff, I have them not just in loose stones, I have them in jewelry, I have so many different things. I've got a fascination with them, but also vibrationally and energy wise, they are so good for certain things. But in particular, when it comes to grounding, the best stone is hematite, which sometimes you can get in its raw kind of unshaped form, which people often call a prophecy stone, which you can kind of get from anywhere. Is a really good thing to have either on your person or in your home. Holding that, putting that in baths, using it when you're making sprays, or sometimes when you're drinking water, just to put that stone in that will help to ground you. Other very popular ones that are up there is smoky quartz, jasper, ruby, garnet, tiger's eye. Actually, there's quite a big list, but the one is hematite, followed closely by smoky quartz, which quite a lot of people like to wear in jewelry. This is quite a beautiful stone. So number 5 is scents. Scents have a vibration of their own, and I've talked about vibrations in one of my earlier videos, but essential oils are very good at a cognitive level in terms of self-soothing. And some of my favorite essential oils for grounding in particular are cedar, sandalwood in particular is great properties, patchouli, and one of my other favorites is ylang ylang. Again, these things are accessible from pretty much anywhere, your local holistic store to being online. Number 6, red. Red is a very extremely grounding color. Try to wear it as a scarf, as a dress, as a necktie. That color, it is very much, if you think about earth and those kind of reddy brown tones are very, very good to help keep you from the anxiety creating madness, but also you can look at images. So maybe it's as paintings and drawings, but also I like to encourage people to actually to be in the present sometimes by doing sort of colouring mindfulness. But if you do that, try to add quite a lot of red in the colouring in that you are doing. And in my workbook that is free, that is a download on my site, which I'm going to talk a little bit more and show you some extracts from, there's a little kind of one to kind of start you off. Number 7 is listening to music. Oh my God, no, people say, oh, I can't meditate. You can. And I can't get in the present. You can. And the best and simplest way, if you find it really hard to focus your mind and to start doing it, is to actually listen to music, your favourite type of music, and get completely lost in it. That will bring you to the present. It will lift your vibration, but also will definitely ground you. Another good one in terms of sounds, if you do want to chant something that, let's say, not, you don't have to have a script for, is to actually hum, and to hum in deep tones. So, for example, I'm just going to do it very quickly right now, and you need to start with a normal tone, so but then I want you to kind of take it as low as it will go, so like this. Now it sounds a bit weird, but if you keep doing that, you're grounding, you're rooting yourself again in your root chakra. And that's like a really simple way to meditate without there being a chant or a ritual that you have to remember. It's just a very good way of rooting yourself. That tone is linked to reducing anxiety and grounding you. So, number 8. We all have somebody in our lives that we are, is stupidly grounded all the time. Sometimes you want to hate them because they're just so grounded and you wish you were like them. Spend time around that person. Spend time around that person's energy. When you feel anxiety, they may be the person you call, they may be the person you want to spend around. But even better, if you can hold the palms of their hands, let's say there's a transfer of energy, so their groundingness will transfer into you, and it just helps. So that's another way of also grounding yourself. Number 9, sea salt. It has to be sea salt, not any other table salt or anything like that. Bath with it, and regularly, once a week, twice a week. And whilst also bathing in it, put your grounding stone that we talked about. So whether it's your prophecy stone or garnet or whatever it is, also add that to your bath, because again, all of that helps to take the negative energies that you have absorbed, or take away those triggers that have been causing you anxiety, and help to keep you grounded. Number 10, I think it would be very negligent of me to not suggest that if your trauma or your anxiety is very, very deep rooted and you're finding it extremely hard to do these techniques on your own, then do seek help. It is not an embarrassment to have this. So many people, in fact, most of the planet suffer with anxiety to varying different degrees, but it seems to be a subject that this is people feel ashamed about. Do not at all feel like that. So seek either some therapy, some counselling to help you kickstart, let's say, the more deep-rooted stuff that is hard to for you to tune in on your own whilst you do your own techniques, until you feel a lot more confidence that you've got a grip of this at a cognitive level. And for those of you who prefer spiritual advisors or life coaching, then do what's right for you. Not every type of person chooses the same type of method of support. So choose what vibrationally you feel works best for you as a way of helping. So those are the quick top 10 tips for quick grounding, which some of you may know and some of you may not, and I hope that's been useful, but they truly do work. And again, you can use one or two, or just use one. If you've got one that constantly hits the point every single time, then that's the one that you should use. So I'm going to go back now to the other screen. Just bear with me as I unclick from this site. Bear with me. So those things are really cool, and I think I just wanted to kind of quickly add in terms of like getting in touch with the earth. You can do it with your bare feet, but a lot of people like to also put their palms of their hands on the floor, and some people like to put their forehead on the floor, and actually sometimes if you're a gardener, that's like perfect. So gardening is a really good way also to become grounded, but also it keeps you in the present kind of moment. And another kind of thing you can do to kind of keep focusing on the present, is to kind of give yourself like what I call a full body scan. So literally go through every part of your body and just check how it feels. And just by doing that, because you're focused so much on each sort of I can't speak, each part of you, basically you're bringing yourself into the focus. Or you might be that you just bring yourself into the focus of the room that you're in and list out loud the things that you can see. Those things bring you to the present. So, and I think also if you're going to be making up any sort of essential oils, also put them in spring water, not tap water, because the tap water is sort of energy where it's kind of been processed and so many things, it just doesn't work so well. So spring water, essential oils, take it around with you and it works really, really well. So just to carry on with the holistic side of things before we progress to something more, I'm also going to be now putting on another slide to kind of talk about a quick sort of meditative thing that you can do to kind of help to ground you. And these are the holistic sides, but hopefully when we get to the other slides later on, you'll be able to track and map literally what triggers your anxiety in order to overcome your anxiety. So again, I'm going to now quickly move on, but quickly just before I say that, some of the slides that I've got here are from the worksheet, which is a free download on my site, which you can download after this live feed. So again, I'm just going to move to my next slide, where we're going to talk about my suggestion. It's quite a common one actually, in terms of being able to ground yourself. Okay, so kind of whenever you're feeling overwhelmed, you might want to try this very simple grounding technique that you can do kind of in less than 10 minutes. So I'd like you to sit or stand in a quiet place. You can do this outside, in nature if you would like. Like I said, get barefooted if you need to. Then I kind of want you to visualize as you stand there. First of all, focusing on your breathing, feeling relaxed. But then I want you to visualize that there are roots kind of stemming from the bottom of your feet. And I want you to visualize that these are continuing to grow downwards and downwards and downwards, connecting the soles of your feet deep into the core of the earth. So basically you need to visualize this line going right down to the core. Continue to breathe in through your mouth and out through your nose as you do this. And as you're doing this, I kind of want you to just visualize all the anxiety and all the negativity and all the stress that you currently have with you. Just let it flow through your feet, through these roots that go right down to the core, and let them pretty much dissolve into Mother Earth. And if you need to do this one at a time with the number of anxieties, do it. But just let them dissolve deep into the roots, down, down, down until they're kind of absorbed by the earth and almost destroyed. Then I kind of want you to visualize green, like a green healing light that comes back from the core, from Mother Earth, coming back up through the roots now. Mother Earth is returning this healing to you. It's going up and up, back up into your feet, through the sole of your feet, running up into your legs and into your heart. And it's filling you with healing and joy and good vibrating energy. Just feel just how amazing that is, and to a point where you'll probably just feel like there's a green whitey kind of light all around you. Do know that that grounding exercise really, really helps, but also helps you to stay connected to Mother Earth, but also help you to feel pretty darn awesome. Do that as many times as you need to. So that's like a really quick meditating technique, and you can watch this video as often as you need to at this part, just to kind of help you with that until you get it. But it's also in the workbook that I talk about a little bit as well. So Again, I'm just going to move to another screen now. Hi, welcome back again. So, right, minutes, that's a really good, quite common technique. And why is the earth so important? You know, I could spend probably most of this session talking about it in an holistic way, but also in a scientific way. But again, if you want something really quick to look at, look at my video when I talk about manifestation and energy, because again, it's about energy and how we are affected by energies, affected by our own planet, is affected by what happens astrologically, because that's for people who study astrology will know that it also has an effect on us, and then how we work with that or let it work against us, if that makes sense. But anyway, I'm sort of going off topic a little bit. So now that you've got some sort of holistic kind of tools, because, and the reason why I've kind of shaped this in two kind of segments is because this is to have a broader reach, but also partly sometimes when you work as an empath, as I do, you've got to, you can't live in the clouds the entire time, because if you do, actually that's not a good thing too, because we are here living the human experience, and this is the aspect that we're living, and the fact that we can tune in, that's a great thing, but then to live there when we're not supposed to be there the entire time whilst we're living this human experience can sort of, you know, make things a bit wacky. So you've got the truest way to stay grounded is to actually come back into the earth sort of realm, to be normal, to be sort of cognitively aware about what impacts you, so that you can manage it better. So now we're going to look now at some small techniques, and again there is more on the worksheet for you to kind of work in to kind of start to bridge that. And what I mean to bridge that, it's to kind of really lay out, and so you can understand what are the things that trigger you specifically. When you can see what triggers you, then you can handle it. If you don't know what's triggering you, and sometimes the things are not as obvious as what you think they are that's triggering you, then you have a way to design your own roadmap, let's say, to manage that, but also to complete that and to not have those episodes happen again in future. Therefore turning things to your advantage, therefore changing your energy and your vibration, therefore pushing you forward more towards abundance and joy in your life, and not the anxiety monster that you have to kind of carry around like a ball and chain. So hi, hello Annette. Welcome, yes, do come. As I'm going along, guys, if you've got any questions, if I can answer them, then I will try to answer them as well. So now I'm going to just move to my next slide, and just afterwards then talk about sort of me and sort of personal experiences with using this also. Bear with me. Okay, so one way of looking at breaking down what the triggers are and how anxiety or your clairsentient empathic ability is affecting you is to kind of understand what happens at a human level and a psychological level when we are impacted by negative energy or other people's energy which is too much, or when we have a panic attack or an anxiety attack, which is normally based on a certain trigger. So first of all, it's about identifying what a particular trigger is. Now for some people it could just be that they've been working as an empath and they've been working all day, and it's kind of being too much in other people's energies that is partly the trigger, if that makes sense. So for other people it could also be that it's a trauma that is either new or old that needs to be managed better than how it's been displayed, which is in this kind of anxious kind of way of expressing itself, which kind of for both parties keeps people a bit prisoner in their own sort of mental kind of cycle, or inner critic, or the ego kind of protecting itself. So you've got to get to the root cause, and this is some of the techniques which I've got here but also is in the workbook. So this is just one sort of extract from the workbook which you can download from my page to kind of go through some of the techniques. So do identify what is one of your triggers. Always start with something, let's say, less traumatic than going for the big stuff straight away. Kind of build up to it, because you need to be ready. Don't kind of do yourself some self-harm by going right for the big stuff straight away. Then, just so you know, at a human level, things, how they impact us in kind of 4 ways. So they impact us either psychologically, sometimes it can be financially, behaviorally, or sort of physically, sorry. So what I mean is, for example, if I have been working all day with particular energies, let's say, or particular scenarios where I've had to engage in somebody else's trauma. So, for example, you know, prior to me working in the line of work that I do now full time, I used to work with victims of crime, and so I would work with people that experience quite traumatic stuff. How that might affect me sometimes if I didn't know how to release that or to let it go or ground myself was sometimes psychologically I would be distracted. So that would be one of the things, or it would create some paranoia. So particularly when you're working with people who've been victims of crime for so long and you hear the kind of same messages, you can sometimes get paranoid at a psychological level, because you start to view the world a little bit tainted and get paranoid sometimes when you're out and about. So that would come up psychologically for me, which would cause some anxiety sometimes. Also, when I looked at how it might affect me physically, what it tended to do is give me heart, you know, my heart would speed up if I was perhaps somewhere where I felt unsafe, because it would be a trigger for me that actually all I'd been hearing that day was quite negative, and that the world was a dangerous place, that physically and psychologically it was manifesting. Behaviorally, how that might display itself is me disconnecting actually from other people in my life that was important to me. So I might ignore their needs or their questions because I'd be drained or exhausted. And so that might show up as me being nonchalant or not interested. Also financially as well, because of working so often with people that are affected by crime, if that paranoia, if I allowed that paranoia to kind of increase, I might decide that I want to spend lots of money making my house much more secure for the fear of maybe burglary or robbery, or I might buy a panic alarm or something like that. So it would hit my wallet because I'd be buying things that I don't necessarily need to have, but would help me to try and self-soothe the kind of psychological aspect of what was triggering my anxiety. This list can go on and on. For some people, depending on the kind of trauma that you may have experienced or listened to, so let's say for anxiety sufferers in general, if you've experienced a trauma that has been so deep, it may manifest financially, because actually part of your new behaviour is that you have started to drink to kind of cope with it. So there's a behaviour that comes out with that, but also, let's just say, financially that's not helping you, and then it creates a vicious cycle. So the trigger of anxiety is there, you cope with it behaviorally by drinking, but that's hitting your wallet financially, which is therefore impacting further anxiety, and a little monster has been created. So this exercise here is so that you have time to look at one aspect of what triggers your anxiety, and there could be many, so do one at a time, and then break down and list all the different things, and then you'll see what's happening. Once you can see it, then it's much more easier to kind of build a roadmap to learning how to unpick that, if that makes sense. So I'm going to just move on to another slide. Bear with me. So this is also in the workbook, which is about sort of doing an emotional timeline. So this is really good to help us to get, once we've mapped out what our triggers are and we can see it and we can see, let's say, the harm it's doing, that's the first step. But this emotional timeline gets us to look at the positive now, because what we've done is kind of unpick what the negatives are. So this timeline, you pretty much have to start from birth all the way to whatever age you are now, and kind of just say to yourself, think of the time that you was, so when you were 5, think of a memory that is quite prominent for you. Now that memory could be good, that memory may be just average, that memory may be not so good, but just kind of rank how you felt at the time, and just do that really all the way up until the age that you are now. And so you should have highs and lows basically, and that's what you're looking for. There's always highs and lows. So for example, I might start really at a number at 5 years old, at staying at 5 because actually it was pleasant. Actually maybe it'd be 6 and 7 because actually nothing terrible was happening in my life, let's say then. And then when I got to 15, there were some highs and lows, but I have a memory that's not so good, so that brings me down to about a 3. I don't feel great. And then when I get to about 20, that goes up again to about an 8 because that's when my boy was born. And so I just feel, great. I feel happy about the way that has enriched and changed my life. And then in my mid-20s, I had some really great times. So I'm going to shoot that up to about a 10 because I've got really favourable memories. Do you see where I'm going with this? You kind of chart up and down, but you must try more to look at where the highs are. So if you do a chart and it's all negative, I want you to kind of then go back and only then search for the positives. Otherwise this technique is not going to work. You'll be living in the anxiety, you'll be living in the negative, you're living in the past, which is what's holding you and causing those triggers. Once you finish your chart, this chart actually sometimes can be quite life-changing, because when you look at it as it is, let's say, and you start to see and recognize the things in your life that actually cause you joy and abundance and happiness, it can lead you towards mapping out what makes you happy so that you can make future plans to also align yourself with things that also make you happy. So for example, if you felt the happiest because you were doing an arts course, but then since then you've not done anything about it, perhaps you need to be going back in your life to either doing an art course or doing a job where allows you to be creative. Do you see where I'm going with this? So it's about understanding the things that lift you, that vibrate you, that make you the happiest. And then once you've figured those out, it's about making a path towards that goal. By having that aim and that goal, that helps with with not bringing the triggers that cause anxiety, but also to not bring in repeat patterns, let's say, that somehow will continue some cycles that leave us in a space of feeling helpless and feeling that nothing right is going to go in our lives, which is not a good feeling at all to have. So I'm going to pause right there and just see if there's any questions before I go on to the next slide. Hello. So it's a really useful tool. There's more in the workbook, but just to kind of I guess give you an example of kind of something that I've done in my life when I recognised that there was something that was causing me anxiety that was completely nothing to do with being a clairsentient or an empath. It was to do with, I had a big fear of abandonment, like massive. And sometimes the demon still lives within, but let's say I've got a firm grip of it, and I haven't had, let's say, a problem or an episode in about 7 years. But let's say I recognised that it was a problem about 7 years ago when something happened to me where I was abandoned. So I had a relationship at the time that wasn't a very good relationship anyway, but I didn't see it at the time. But basically this person abandoned me. And they abandoned me in quite a dramatic way. They actually left the country, which, when I say it like that, it sounds weird, but it basically sent me a bit not in a happy place, basically. And this technique kind of worked to unpick why I was sort of having sort of, let's say, some psychological and some behavioural aspects of myself, so that I didn't find that I was coming under control. So I had to kind of dig and do those kind of exercises and some other similar ones to kind of map out why that one episode of abandonment was so sort of huge. So then I had to track it back, which is where that timeline comes into real hands. So what I found was I had another experience, quite large experience of abandonment when I was about 16. When I was 16, my mother suddenly went on holiday to America and never came back. And I was really not in a good place about that either. So then I thought, aha, I got the problem. The problem is when I was 16, that happened. And even though, you know, things are fine between me and my mother, and I love my mother very, very much, and she's like my best friend. But at the time, it took about 5 years to get over that, that abandonment at that time. So I thought that's the trigger. So I was doing all the mapping work and it still wasn't it. It still wasn't it. So I had to map back again. There was something more before that, and there was something more before that, actually something that had always been with me, but I didn't actually recognise until I'd done this exercise, which is that I never knew my real father. And at the time, I felt that he had abandoned me and never wanted to be in my life for all sorts of different reasons. Then I had the problem. I had the real root of the monster that kept sort of reappearing. And actually, when I look at this at a holistic level and as an empath and as I work with my guides, I know exactly why I had that experience, because actually I chose it. But recognizing it helped me to get over the anxiety, because then I could start to map out how I was going to solve it. So now I knew the trigger. How was I going to solve it? Particularly when I didn't know where my father was and all I had was one name. Well, I set my intention, I set my vibration to find him no matter what. And it took 37 years, but I did find him. I did find him, and he wasn't horrible. In fact, he's awesome. He calls me every day, every week, says he loves me, sees him all the time. He's fantastic. It completed that aspect. But going along, I also had to complete the aspect of forgiveness when it came to my mother, but also that one individual who had started it all off as well. I had to complete it all. So this is what I mean by once you can identify what the triggers are in terms of your feeling, how it affects you behaviourally, particularly around the addictive part and particularly around sort of financial, because the behavioural and the financial can sometimes go hand in hand. Once you identify those, and then you can map your timeline on certain aspects of that one anxiety, then you can plan how you can solve it yourself, if that makes sense. So thanks for letting me share. So I'm going to now go on to another exercise, which is again around grounding, because you've done all those kind of unpicking, but now it's about grounding yourself in the now. So this is so true, particularly if you're empathic, particularly if you're an anxiety sufferer. So kind of what that means is when you're empathic, let's say, or when you've got anxiety, your energy's up here. It's like crazy, you know. And when you're an empath like me, you're reading other people's energy and you're going into kind of all consciousness, you're up in a different vibration. But sometimes you've got to live in the non-extrasensory abilities. You've got to live in the senses you have now. So this is what this slide is about. So bear with me as I find that slide. Or not. Hello again. So this is also in the worksheet that is a free download on my website. It's again deep level stuff, so you've got all the kind of holistic approaches, but this is somewhere in between the both. So this is an holistic approach, but also looking at the human kind of cognitive behavior, because the two are very much linked. We can't ignore that we have to live the flesh as well as live the spiritual, and this is kind of a harmony of the two. So basically, in order to ground oneself, sometimes, particularly when we have anxiety triggers or we have absorbed too much energy, another way of grounding it is to use our existing everyday senses and not necessarily our extrasensory abilities. So it's like switching between the two. You need to switch back, and sometimes to do that you've got to tap in to those triggers. So the 5 senses are taste, sight, smell, hearing and touch. Those are the everyday ones that we all have. Nothing special, nothing supernatural about them at all. So when you're having, let's say, an episode where you're absorbing too much energy and it's causing anxiety, or you've got a triggering traumatic event that's happening in your life which is causing anxiety, if you can use this tool ahead of this, so from now, to kind of list the things that make you feel calm, that soothe you, that ground you, that are linked to those senses, this will help. and then figuring out a way in your everyday life how you can have access to these, or how you can then calm yourself and put yourself in a thoughtful place to be thinking about these things, will help initiate grounding. And if you do this very frequently, it is going to be very, 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 very sort of useful for turning off those triggers pretty much immediately the more that you do it. So for example, with taste, if I've got, again, we'll use the example of me working with somebody who has been a victim of crime, and it's causing me to have that paranoia that I talked about before. I might think to myself in that instance, to try and ground myself, what is a taste that I associate with calmingness? What calms me down? Chocolate, I have to say, as you can see from what's written on there. You know, chocolate would do it every time, and I think you'll all appreciate that. So I might think about chocolate, but I think more importantly, I will make sure I'll have chocolate to hand or know where to get it in order to help me refocus. So that's going to go on my list, but I might have more than one, so don't just stick to one. If you've got a number of things, because you want it to be as available and accessible to you, then do pick more than one thing. But also, more importantly, do not choose things that are associated with the trigger, if that makes sense. So for example, let's say you are in a car accident, but at the time of the car accident you were drinking Coke, let's say. Don't choose Coke, because that's going to be associated with that memory. So then we've got to then look at the other things. So for me, sight would be, what do I like to look at? I might choose to look at one of my dogs, particularly one of them, because he has a way of making you melt. So again, I might go and look at him, I might even go touch him. I might also find a picture on my phone if I'm not around him to help ground me as well. Same with smell. There's some very good essential oils that I like the smell of right now. I'm actually into orange, but I do go through different stages, but orange at the moment seems to feel very uplifting and makes me feel good. So, but I have a few, so my list for smell would be quite long. And again, I might make a spray up of that scent and walk with it with me. So do you get the theme here? So for every category, you just list things, but then figure out how you can have access to them in your everyday life. So you're not in a place where you're out in the street and you don't have access to one of them. And it doesn't mean that when you're trying to calm yourself you need to use all 5, but by just using 1 or 2 of those methods to kind of bring you back into the present and to bring you into a calming space is going to help you. So this is where this exercise is going to be very, very useful. So I hope that kind of makes sense to you. It is extremely useful and works very much at reprogramming what's happening at a cognitive level, which is what I said, you need to stay in touch with where you are physically and not always stay in the spiritual or stay in the anxiety space. So so important to not live in the extrasensory place all the time, because or as beautiful as that is, it's about finding a balance, because you're actually more powerful that way. If you can, tap into the extrasensory ability that you may have, whatever that is, clairsentient, clairvoyant, mediumship, healing, or whether you have anxiety, it's the same thing to me, if I'm being honest with you, because the energy vibrationally takes you somewhere else. The only difference is it's a bit like a butterfly. It can seem a bit out of control, so it's beautiful, but it's out of control. You've got to kind of learn to just ground yourself into the flesh, which is the aspect of you that you're living. To try to live too much out of it doesn't serve you. It steals your light, and then therefore makes you no good to yourself, and then it therefore makes you no good to anybody else. And you can do it. And like I said, if you can't do these things by yourself at first, because I'm a great believer that we should empower ourselves to try to learn to do these things, because it's you have to live with going forward. If you can't do it by yourself at first, then seek the type of help that best helps you. But also, I think as a society we do need to start talking about this more, because there's nothing to be ashamed of. So I hope these techniques have kind of been helpful to you. Thanks so very much for everybody who's kind of tuned in today. If you're watching the repeat as well, thank you for joining. And if you haven't liked my page, please do. These are weekly events, and people vote on the next sort of subject that I talk about. My website is going to be posted above, but also the link will be posted to the free work sheet. There's also some other free worksheets or audios as well that other people may want to kind of peruse and to kind of go along. But I mean, I do hope this has overall sort of been helpful, and that you can find a way to slowly map your progress towards joy and abundance. But also, I would, and I do say in the workbook, don't jump to the hard stuff. If you've got some real deep stuff, don't just jump there. Do baby steps. Otherwise, you don't want to trying to grapple with something that you haven't built up the confidence in knowing how to identify it, knowing how to relive it, and therefore then tackling it in a way that is productive and serves you and is not sort of against you, if that makes sense. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining me here on Facebook, but also on YouTube. Do download, do share this if you think that it will be helpful for anybody else. To join my community if you want to have more enlightenment talks as well. And also, just so that you know, because I've had a few people ask me as well, my website, the currency is converted to all currencies worldwide, because I have clients from everywhere as well. Let's just answer a couple of people's questions that I've had this week. So I do hope this has been helpful. Again, for me, the most empowering aspect that you can have is to get a fine balance between living the spiritual but also living the flesh. Once you get that balance and you can reset your vibration, and joy and abundance will come to you. So it's good night from me here in the UK, and till next week. Bye bye for now.